theater, there is a part of the rehearsal process called tech. This is where you watch your show you've worked so hard on for the past few months fall apart when all of your technical elements such as lighting, sound, and other effects are added to the scenes. In a normal production, once the show falls apart, you are able to pretty quickly put it back together and make it better than it was before. That was not the case for Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. This show was already being held together by a thread, and once it fell apart, there was no putting this monster back together. It didn't help that Julie Taymor was adamant about changing nothing in the show. Her insecurity and stubbornness led to her co-writer having to sneak around and gather forces to try and help save the show. But how do you save a sinking ship when the captain has burned all the lifeboats and is about to ram the ship straight into jagged rocks? Mutiny! Today, I will be completing the story of how Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark became the most controversial musical in Broadway history. Welcome to Strange Ride, where I tell the smartest man I know the weirdest things I know. My name is Savannah Barrett, and I will be your guide today. But you're not the only ones going on this ride. I have a returning guest here, Will Alderson.
Hello.
And then, of course, we have the smartest man I know, Rob C. Thompson of Occult Confessions fame.
You're crashing my boat against the rocks. Why have you burned the lifeboat, Savannah?
Oh, man, because I just decided I didn't need them anymore, you know?
Yeah, balls to the walls, I hear that. Ovaries to the walls.
Yeah. There is, I just think it's hilarious that, and we're going to get into it in this episode, but basically Julie Taymor refused to do anything to fix this show, so Glenn Berger, made a coup against her and gets her kicked out of the show. Spoiler alert. But yes, we'll get into all of that.
Plan X.
Plan X, and Bono and Edge play a very big role in it. So it'll be very interesting.
It was called Plan X?
It was. Mm-hmm. We're going to get into it. There was a lot of different names. Yeah, there were a couple different names, actually. Oh, I can't wait for you to hear this.
I don't know that I have. I don't go around having plan. I'm not like a Batman villain. Like, what?
Well, that's your first mistake, Rob.
I mean, you could plan a lot of coups. I feel like, Rob, you're the planner of the coup. I feel like.
Okay, I hear that. My talents are being wasted on not planning coups. I'll get into that.
Alrighty then, let's get into the pledge. I solemnly commit myself to keep my hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the vehicle at all times while on this strange ride. Please remain seated. Your strange ride will resume immediately. So, as Glenn Berger is enjoying Chinese food with his family on one of his very short allotted breaks, he opens a fortune cookie that says, "Clear writing arises from clear thinking," which felt very pertinent to the situation he was in. Everyone was feeling the morale dropping at an alarmingly fast rate, and Berger was no exception. But what really got to him was one night during a preview, he went to the restroom where he passed a young boy leaving the restroom with his mom, and the boy looked miserable. Berger thought this little boy was here to see a superhero in front of him, and instead of being full of joy, he looked like he wanted to leave. And it sort of clicked to him, who are we making this musical for? He racked his brain all night that night and decided that what was needed to save this musical was to cut Deeply Furious, one of Arachne's songs that Taymor had specifically asked Bono and Edge for. Deeply Furious became known online as the Shoe Song because Arachne was furious with Peter Parker because he didn't want to be with her and he wanted to be with Mary Jane instead. So the song begins with the line, "What does she have that I don't have? Is it this? Is it that? Shoes?" And then she's like, "I don't have shoes. I need to get some shoes." And then the dancers in spider legs appear and do sexy dances while putting shoes on Arachne, spreading their many legs wide open for the audience. Berger was right. The song needed to go. And its reprise that it also had. I just can't even. It was so weird. The number for it was so weird. And it feels weird that she's like, Julie Taymor sees Arachne as this super feminist character, but she throws a temper tantrum because Peter Parker doesn't want to sleep with her. That, I don't know. That doesn't feel very feminist to me.
I've never seen that in the comics, so.
No, the shoes are also like, it's sort of like a trope of femininity, right?
Yes.
That women are obsessed with shoes.
Exactly.
My wife does have more shoes than me, but the foot fetish thing why is that everywhere? Is Tarantino involved in this somehow?
Well, also like spider feet too. Like I don't go around thinking that like, who thinks spider feet are sexy?
Yeah, that's an odd one.
Yeah. And it had a reprise. And then after that, she still had another song that I can't remember the name of that was still about why Peter won't sleep with her and that she's pissed off about it. So it's just great. Ugh.
It could be a whole musical just about this Arachne trying to be like, why won't he sleep with me?
It basically was, though. That's basically all of Act 2. So anyway, the next day... I can see
why that boy is sad.
Yes. Yeah, right? You want to see Spider-Man swinging around, and then you got this lady singing about, like, why won't Spider-Man fuck me?
I think there can be love in like WWE is like when I think about what a 12-year-old boy is into, and I know as a 12-year-old boy, I myself was not into WWE, but like there's women and there's like plot lines involving women, but there's always a lot of action. Like there's not a lot of dwelling on the crushes that they have on each other,
Right. And also Spider-Man always ends up with Mary Jane. So it's like, he's already with Mary Jane. Why do we need to worry about this lady? Who is this lady? I've never seen this lady before.
It's either Mary Jane or your back gets broken if you're Gwen Stacy.
Yes, that too. Yeah, so maybe Arachne is lucky that she isn't one of Spider-Man's love interest.
Yeah.
And Mary Jane gets kidnapped twice in this musical. So it's just not a good idea to be one of Spider-Man's love interests.
Yeah. Like a Super Mario fake out, right? You think you won, but you haven't.
Yep.
She gets captured again.
Yeah, the Green Goblin kidnaps her and the Spider-Man saves her. And then Arachne kidnaps her and tries to suffocate her at the end of the show. But
Lord.
Yep. All right. Well, we're going to get into what Glenn Berger thought he needed to do to fix the show. The next day, Bono called Berger, and you're going to love this, Rob. Bono revealed to him that he and Edge were sending secret agents to see the show and report back to them what they thought while the boys were busy doing U2 things. And they couldn't see it themselves. So Berger pitched cutting Deeply Furious from the show and tightening the ending, and Bono agreed that these changes would fix the problems that he said his secret agents had with the show. So.
I'm at the bar now, and the guy's like hitting on a girl, and she's like, "What do you do for a living?" He's like, "Oh, I'm a musical theater secret agent."
For Bono and the Edge.
Yeah, well, now he's getting laid, but the first part, I'm not so sure.
To cut Deeply Furious from the show, this was dubbed Plan A. And Bono said that he would call Tamor and describe Plan A to her. And apparently the two had a 2-hour-long conversation that did not go well. And Bono said that she seemed really defensive about Arachne. As long as Tamor was involved, it didn't seem like Plan A was happening. Berger and Tamor had a great relationship these past few years, so he wrote her an email detailing why he thought Plan A was a good idea, and trying not to be harshly critical of Tamor's ideas, he ended the email with, "Love you." And he sent it to her, not expecting to hear back right away, but she called him practically immediately after he sent it and said,
"No. If all of you think the cut is such a great idea, you can do it without me, because that isn't a cut. It's a mastectomy."
Whoa.
Yes. Whoa. And that was just cutting out one of Arachne's songs.
How many songs did she have again?
She sings the first one. She sings Turn Off the Dark. She sings In Rise Above. She sings Deeply Furious Reprise.
Yeah.
Something after Deeply Furious, I can't remember the name of it. And then she sings in Love Me and Kill Me. That's 7 songs.
Let it go, man.
Yeah, 7 songs for one character. It's, yeah.
Who isn't the main character.
Right.
At this point, Berger started reaching out to the other creatives behind Tamor's back to see what they thought of Plan A. George Sipin responded to him saying, "This change is a matter of life or death for the show." He was on board. It seemed that everyone Berger told about Plan A was for it. Tamor went away for 5 days, and in that time, Plan A was spread to everyone, and everyone was voicing their approval. January 3rd, the day before Tamor was supposed to return to New York, Berger had a secret meeting with Bono and Edge, and he explained to them the revisions he wanted to make for the show, and they were completely on board. They then planned that the next night they would have a meeting with Tamor, and they would convince her to do Plan A. January 4th arrives, and after the previews, Bono, Edge, Berger, and Michael Cole, the lead producer of the show, and Tamor were all in the VIP room where the four men were trying to convince Tamor that Act 2 became the Arachne show and things needed to be changed. She didn't listen to a single thing they said, dug in her heels, and said that all three of Arachne's Temper Tantrum songs needed to be included. She said things like, it's part of Peter's arc and stuff, that like these, if you take it out, it ruins the entire story. And it's like, a character that isn't Peter Parker taking one of their songs out of the show would ruin Peter Parker's arc. I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I don't understand this at all. I mean, there was a time when I was in my early 20s and I was making theater where I had this kind of reaction when people wanted to make changes to what I was doing because I was a new artist, director, whatever. You got to outgrow that though, man. Like you can't keep on that way. If you don't outgrow that, you can't survive. But somehow she's still Julie Taymor. Like she's made it this far, but she can't listen when she's the asshole, when everybody else in the room is saying,
I mean, Rob, I love your theater and you are a genius, but you didn't make Lion King on Broadway.
That's true. Thank you, Will, for saying that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean, and also too, another thing that like Julie Taymor is sort of famous for is her uncompromising vision. And she's it's almost like Disney with Epcot, where he was proving people wrong his entire life. Julie Taymor never gave up on her vision, and she was constantly winning, except for when she wasn't.
Yeah, that's the risk. I mean, and it's antithetical to what we do as artists. I mean, in theater, go be like a painter or a novelist or something where you have like one editor. But in theater, you're working with, dozens and dozens of people.
Yes. And if everyone is telling you that it's bad and that it needs to be changed, you have to listen. It's just crazy. Theater is a collaborative art, and if you don't want to collaborate, don't do theater. Like, you just can't.
Exactly.
It's pretty rare that you're in a situation where your vision is absolutely correct and everyone else is bonkers. I mean, Walt Disney had a bunch of people who were with him. He just had people against him, right? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like there was a crew of people saying, oh yeah, Walt, we can do this. This is great. This is a cool idea. But in that scenario, she doesn't have anyone saying that to her.
No, not a single person was on board with this show anymore. Even the actors, none of them. And she even I pointed out George Sipin saying that he was on board with Berger because she was like, George is never going to go for this. Like, he's never going to go for it. He likes me too much. And then Berger went to him and Sipin was like, no, we need to do this. Like, the show is going to die without this change. And so it's like, she just had no idea what was going on this whole time. She just became obsessed with this character.
And I think, she assumed everyone would be on her side, but then she didn't, I think, put into account that this cost $300 million and that, producers don't want something that's worth $300 million to be bad.
Yes. And also, to not make any money. After these previews, nobody was going to go see it because it's it's a bad show. Nobody wants to watch this show. Except for the people who were there to see it be like a car crash, like in NASCAR.
Yeah, like my mom said.
Yes, which is actually something that people said in the book too. And that was another thing is Julie Taymor refused to read any of the reviews. She said, I'm not even going to read the good ones. And Glenn Berger was like, what good ones? Yeah, they weren't getting any good reviews, but she was saying, oh, I'm just not reading any of the reviews, even the good ones. But they weren't getting any good ones. And that's why she wouldn't listen or read them.
I will say it's not uncommon for actors, artists in process to not read reviews. The stage manager's job. Some stage managers, their role is to cut out good reviews and post them on the board.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but they don't post bad reviews because it would bring down the morale of the group. Oh,
for sure.
Taymor, though, is not really actively performing. So I don't know. It's really up to the individual artist as far as critics are concerned, because they can also be wildly wrong about a commercial product, as we all know.
Oh, yeah.
An audience can love something while the critics hate it. In this case, what they were trying to create, in my opinion, was something that the critics would hate and the audience would love, because it's a big poppy, schlocky Spider-Man show that a 12-year-old boy just eats up. A critic's not going to say, what genius. But with this Arachne character, she's trying to get that critical response. What a genius. And yet she's not even looking looking to read that. Like that is strange.
I think that if they were getting good reviews, she would have read it, I think is the thing.
Somebody, her assistant, right? Saying, nope, don't pick up the New York Times today.
yes, honestly. So after all that arguing, it seems that Plan A was once again in limbo. So January 7th, Jerry Harris told Berger, this is so weird, okay? This is going to sound really weird, but this is what happens. And I don't know his last name, so don't ask. But January 7th, Jerry Harris told Berger about Jack the stagehand, who apparently rewrites scripts for fun, and said maybe he should just hear what Jack has to say in case it could inspire some changes. So Jack the stagehand was actually a stagehand working on Spider-Man. I don't know how Jerry Harris learned of Jack, and I don't know Jack's last name. But Jerry Harris gave Jack the stagehand Berger's email, and Jack emailed him, and his suggestion changed everything. Like, Berger said he didn't even read his entire email because the first sentence was all he needed. The Green Goblin didn't die in Act 1. That was the change he wanted to make.
The stagehand.
The stagehand.
This is a bold move by a stagehand. You could get fired for this.
When the producer is the one being like, oh, no, you should email the co-writer of this.
Go stagehand, go.
I swear to God, it just like pops out of nowhere. It's like 1 or 2 paragraphs in the book, and it's just like Jack the stagehand gave me the idea to save the show.
Where is this man? I need him to work at the college with us.
You did it, Jack. But
he could really help with Halloween. And this is something that honestly seems relatively obvious, but I guess when you're so stuck in this like Arachne bit that, you know, like Arachne has to be the final battle. When you think about the Green Goblin being the final battle, you're like, oh my God, you're right. This is a Spider-Man musical. The Green Goblin should be the final boss. And that's what they wanted to do. And Berger dubbed this plan X. So we've jumped from A to X.
Yes.
As in Axe Tamor.
Yeah, basically. So, well, actually, this is pretty funny, too. So Harris comes up to Berger and is like, hey, did you get Jack's email? And Berger's like, yeah, I think I want to change some things. And Harris is like, stop talking, let's go to dinner. And like they leave the theater so nobody will hear them, and they go to dinner to talk about Plan X. And then they talk about how they can plan it without Tamor finding out, because she would lose her mind.
Yeah.
Ron Bissinger was the next person who needed to be brought into the loop, because the change would cut a scenic element from the show. And when the idea was brought to him, Bissinger said he believed it could be done and that it should be done. And then a few days later, the entire cast and crew were having a party to celebrate what would have been the show's opening night at the Spotted Pig, which was owned by either Bono or The Edge. Berger jumped into a car with the boys and some composer assistants, but they made sure that Julie Taymor was not in the car. So they were perfectly safe, because I don't think Julie Taymor had any secret agents or bugs anywhere hidden in the car.
That you know of.
Yeah, that I know of, or that Berger knows of. But Julie did not know about Plan X yet, because when she learns about Plan X, it's a big thing. And he told everyone about Plan X, and everyone was on board. And apparently Bono grabbed Berger's hand and very dramatically said,
I'm in.
What a weirdo.
He's so weird. And so everyone seemed in relatively good spirits at the party, because Chris Tierney was there, which, if you remember, Chris Tierney was the one that fell into the 30-foot pit and broke basically every bone in his body. But he's been pretty well recovered, and he's at the party. And then in the middle of the party, Julie Taymor gets up and gives a speech saying it didn't matter what the public thought of the musical, and that what mattered was that they were staying true to their original vision. And everyone at this point turned on Taymor. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. And it sounded like from that speech that she didn't care if the show closed. And it sounded like to everyone that she was saying she had no intentions of fixing the show. And Edge, after hearing this, was pissed.
I can't believe she just said that.
He went to Berger at the end of the night and whispered into his ear,
as her partners and her friends, it is right to support Julie in her vision. But It is also right, at the same time, to continue on a separate track and develop this other plan, should we need it.
And then
So why not just do the thing that fixes it? Because she's clearly off the edge. Not the edge. An edge.
So they need... I think what their idea was with Plan X was that they didn't want Julie Taymor gone because they were all still friends with her. However, she was very quickly pissing everyone off, especially with that speech. That speech turned everyone against her, like the entire cast, like people, like I'm shocked. It must have, like, after she finished that speech, you must have been able to hear a pin drop in the room because like everybody was like, what did she just say? Like, I think that their idea was that they wanted to really have a solid ground for Plan X and like really make the plans elaborate and like concrete. And then they would take it to Julie and be like, see how this fixes the show? This will fix everything. That way she couldn't like nitpick and take it apart. They wanted to make it like super solid first, is what I think. Anyway. Okay. Because they were still planning on taking the plan to her. That at this point, they still were not thinking about getting her fired. But although it sounds like the Edge was like, no, I think Julie should leave. He was so angry that night, apparently. Bono then told Berger that the meeting to discuss Plan X with Taymor would be held on Wednesday, January 12th. Berger reached out to Sipin and Bissinger to let them know the status of the plan, and he ended his email with,
"But keep it under the hat."
So it's like full-blown like spies and secretness and everything. Like it really is like he's launching a coup against her. I love it. It's amazing.
But he thinks she's just going to be like, oh, cool, good idea.
I don't know. I think they wanted to give her one last chance, but I think that in, like you said, in their heart of hearts, that they knew that she was never going to accept it.
Yeah, so, I think that they wanted her to, step down, and so they didn't have to fire her. I think it was just like, let's tell her our plan, and her just be like, nope, I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to leave, instead of like, yeah, we're going to do this and you're fired. That way there's no bad blood. But
I see that. I've seen that in my professional life. In my experience, you run the risk of that just not happening, and then you have a more awkward situation than if you had just said, we're doing this and you're not involved anymore.
So everyone online was also saying that they believe that the Spidey Goblin fight should happen at the end of the show to fix all the problems with the show. And apparently on the afternoon of January 11th, Taymor even said herself that it could be a good idea. And when Berger was like, you think this is a good idea? Like, we should talk about this. And Taymor was like,
oh, Glenn, don't think about that now.
And she told him not to tell Cole or Harris, although they already knew.
Once you open that door, they'll want to do it. And then, forget it. It'll be a theme park show. This is how shows die, when people start abandoning the vision that got us here.
What vision? For Spider-Man? It needs to be a theme park show. That's the whole point.
Exactly! It's just crazy. Oh my god! It just doesn't make
Even Lion King's a theme park show, but like you just add the puppets to it.
Yes, honestly, I feel like all the puppetry makes it a theme park show. And I also don't understand why theme park show has to have such a negative connotation, but they use it like it's like you're saying the show is shit. And it's like, come on now.
Well, it ain't art, but that doesn't mean that it can't be fun.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like Disney World shows are really fun, and like they like the Aladdin extravaganza or whatever they used to have. Like I thought that was pretty cool looking, and didn't think it like think anything like, oh, this is award worthy, but I was like, oh, it's pretty cool. I'm having fun.
Yeah, that's what Spider-Man should have been, is a show to have fun. But Julie Taymor and Bono and Edge, and honestly Glenn Berger too, were like, no, we're gonna make this a work of art. This is going to be amazing. And
Bono and the Edge, oh my goodness, none of those people should be. They don't make art. They make pop music. They make pop things. I mean, I get that. I don't know, it's confusing. Like, even as I'm saying that, like, yes, rock music, even their music, especially their music about Ireland and Irish politics, like, yes, there's a message there, but it's got a hook and it's fitting with the musical styles of the 80s, and people like to listen to it, and they put it on Apple phones and stuff. It's just like, it's not, I mean, I don't know your role.
Yep. Also know your role when you say, yes, I'll make a Spider-Man musical. But
yeah, I mean,
and again, they just did it because allegedly because Andrew Lloyd Webber was just like, no one makes rock musicals like I do, and they're just like, oh yeah, well, let's show him. Let's show the daddy of Broadway what we can do.
Don't call him that, please.
And Arachne is I feel like Green Goblin and Spider-Man and the fight, this is the core of what they got handed, and then they built Arachne, or Tamor did, separate from that or out of that. So the core story was always the Green Goblin and that whole arc, right?
Yes, except that they ended it in Act 1.
Yeah.
And the thing is, too, is like they took a lot of inspiration from the Tobey Maguire movie, which featured him fighting the Green Goblin. And I think that's a good idea. If you're making a Spider-Man musical, it should be about Spider-Man versus the Green Goblin. This would be like making a Batman musical, because like, everybody knows how much Batman and the Joker, like, they have to fight. Like, they are the arch nemesis or whatever. You make a Batman musical, Batman kills Joker, and in Act 1, and then some creepy bat lady is like, Batman, why won't you fuck me? The whole second half of the musical, I'd be so pissed. I'd be like, what the fuck is this shit?
And it's wouldn't even be like Poison Ivy or one of the regular characters you'd see. Or
Catwoman. A completely different thing.
Yeah.
Yes, something that doesn't exist in the lore of Batman or Spider-Man. It's just so weird. And then on top of that, I personally think that this is another insult, is that they say that the Sinister Six, which is something that appears in Spider-Man, and in Spider-Man, the Sinister Six is made up of real people, although they're all like weird and supervillains and stuff. They are real people. In this musical, they try to claim that Arachne, who does not exist in Superman or Spider-Man lore, is the reason that they exist, that they are just illusions of hers. And it's just like, no, you can't just create a new character who then creates all these other characters that people already know. To me, that just feels really weird.
I have to make this comparison, and apologies. This is very much the Twin Peaks problem. Listeners, if you are Twin Peaks fans, I think you can identify the Twin Peaks problem here. Now, that David Lynch creates this, it lasts for 2 seasons. Savannah, Will, do you know Twin Peaks? Either
I
of you?
did not.
Yeah, I do.
You got to. Will's on board. You got to watch this, Savannah. It is an incredible 2 seasons. There's some.
It's weird, but
yes,
it is good.
So the Twin Peaks problem that David Lynch had is a murder mystery. Who killed Laura Palmer is the question for the show, and he solves that midway through season 2. He tells you who killed Laura Palmer, and I won't spoil it for you. But then what David Lynch does is he takes this extra evil, like cosmic evil, that is somehow responsible for the death of Laura Palmer, and pivots the plot to focus on that. And what happens at the end of season 2 is some of the finest and most bizarre television that I think has ever made it to network, until, of course, David Lynch went to HBO and created a bizarre 12, 15 hours of more of that weirdness. But he lost his audience when he answered his question, who killed Laura Palmer? It seems like Tamor is trying to
made a movie of it too.
Oh yeah, and the movies were. I mean, I am a huge fan of everything about this. Yeah. I've watched the movies. I've watched it all. I watched the HBO series. I patiently sat through it. I even watched some of them twice. It really takes an aficionado. Like, I love the weird. But the general audience for Twin Peaks, when it was on network television, was not on board with the weird. They wanted to solve the mystery. And when it was over, it was over. Tamor's doing the same thing with Arachne. She solves the problem, but then claims that there's this grander evil at work, and that she hasn't actually solved the Peter Parker problem. I mean, script-wise, play structure-wise, dramatic structure, if the main villain is the Green Goblin, then you've ruined your show, because we need to go to the end. But her claim and her character arc and her quest for Spider-Man is claiming that there's something grander going on. David Lynch gets away with it with many people because Twin Peaks was a bizarre show and it had enough weirdness in it that it got to kick on and spawn all these fans. I don't know that you can accomplish that in 2 hours of theater, though.
No. And not with a character that is as well established as Spider-Man.
Yeah, and she doesn't have the chops of a David Lynch. Like, she's not, she doesn't think in surreal ways.
Own original characters, so he had a way to make you care about these original characters.
And Mark Frost, of course, also creates these characters with David Lynch. Don't want to get yelled at by Twin Peaks fans. Savannah?
I wouldn't want that to happen. They're hardcore.
ruin my whole year.
All right. Well, to continue on, remember how I said earlier how Julie Taymor was like, I'm not going to read any of the good reviews or the bad reviews. Well, she got one good review and she flaunted it everywhere. And this is another very weird part of the story. So the person who gave them the good review was Glenn Beck, who is a leader in the Tea Party movement.
Yes, Glenn Beck.
Yes.
Jon Stewart used to roast him all the time on The Daily Show.
I bet. He loved the show. He went on his morning talk show the next day after seeing it and was like, this show is amazing. Everybody needs to see this show. And he was talking about the version with Arachne as basically the main character.
Well, so what Tucker Carlson has been to MAGA, conservatives, that's what Glenn Beck was to Tea Party conservatives on Fox News.
Well, Glenn Beck also, he was the guy that I think during COVID came out and said, I don't care if my kid dies. He died for a good cause.
He's a strange duck, big conspiracy guy. He would have all the red lines, the strings like Charlie Day. Yeah, he would literally do that on TV.
That is so weird. And he loved this musical. He loved this musical.
And Julie Taymor said, I'm with this Tea Party guy.
Yes. Yes. And then this also seemed to bolster her confidence because later that day, Glenn Berger walked into the theater and she was with the dancers and she was expanding Deeply Furious. She was like, we're not cutting it out. We're making it longer.
Did she get confused? Did she think that Beck liked it, not Glenn Beck?
No, and she knew.
She knew it was Glenn Beck.
That guy. Yeah.
She knew it wasn't Beck.
No.
Okay.
Berger.
Okay.
I mean, even Beck liking it would be weird because he's Scientology. So
yeah, I guess. But his music's good. So
yeah.
Oh, you guys are talking about someone else entirely, but I have no idea who you're talking about. I just caught on to that.
You know Beck.
You know.
Sure.
Rock.
Okay. Well, anyway.
I'm a loser. Is that him? Yeah. Right? Isn't that him?
The meeting was supposed to be happening that night, the night that she decided she wanted to expand Deeply Furious. And so everybody was prepared. It was they asked Julie Taymor to go to the VIP room and they were all in a separate room being basically hyping themselves up, being okay, we're going to convince her to do Plan X tonight. And so Michael Cole goes into the room to see where Julie's head is at. And apparently, I don't know what they were arguing about, but they got into a huge fight where Julie Taymor quit several times and that he had to chase her back and blah, blah, blah. And so Glenn Berger ran up to him and was like, what, wasn't she that upset about Plan X? And Cole was like, I didn't even talk about Plan X. And I'm like, what were they fighting about then? But so because of the fight between Cole and Taymor, they were pushing off the meeting for Plan X again. So, and then speaking of postponements and pushing back, opening night was getting moved again from February 7th to March 15th, the Ides of March, the day that Caesar was murdered. And the critics at this point were very angry that opening night was getting pushed back again. So in protest, they decided that they were going to come review the show on February 7th anyway and just treat it as if it was opening night. And the night ended up getting dubbed as Fopening Night. There were more secret car meetings, secret Edge's apartment meetings, and a secret interview for a replacement director. And finally, it was time for Fopening Night. and the reviews were not great, as to be expected. It also didn't help that it was the most technically disastrous show since December. So on February 18th, Berger decided to take a chance, and he wrote an email to Tamor detailing Plan X. And in the most, like, sitcom-y way possible, she hadn't missed a single email of his ever, but for some reason, she missed this email. And so she didn't read it. And then the next day, they were talking about something, and it made him think that she had read it and denied it. So they just never talked to each other about Plan X. And she never read the email. So she didn't actually know about Plan X. They ended up setting a new date for February 26th to discuss Plan X. And they actually went through with this meeting. Although at this meeting, Berger kind of chickened out. He wanted to try and play both sides. So Michael Cole, Jerry Harris, Berger, and Tamor were there. Maybe, I think the Edge was also there, but I don't remember for sure. But basically, those three people, Edge, Michael Cole, and Jerry Harris, were like, Julie Taymor, we need to change the show. And Glenn Berger is then like, yeah, but like, we don't have to change it that much though. And so like, he's making the producers pissed at him. And then Julie Taymor is still pissed at him because she's like, you want to change the show. And so like, he succeeded in making everyone angry with him instead of being like, oh, I'm the middleman, I'm okay. I don't know what happened here, why he was all of a sudden like, well, maybe we can still do some things for Julie. Like, no, you know that the show is failing. Like, stick up for it. You were the one who came up with Plan X. Stick up. Well, Jack the Stagehand came up for it, but you probably wrote a little bit more than Jack the Stagehand. But they sat in this room for 5 hours talking about this. And at the end of that 5 hours, Bono wasn't there, so they decided not to hold a vote on whether or not to change the show because Bono wasn't there, and they were like, well, we want Bono's vote. So it just like, they just argued in a room for 5 hours, and then nothing came of it. Tamor had to leave New York for a few days at the beginning of March because she was going to do a TED Talk, and Berger had a meeting with the producers and the boys where they fully fleshed out Plan X, and it was now happening. Like, it was going to happen with or without Julie Taymor, and most likely without Julie Taymor. And oh, never mind. It was without, because I just read my own notes and it said when Tamor would return to New York, she would be fired. So they were like, okay, no, Tamor's out. And so 2 weeks after sending the Plan X email to Tamor, she finally reads it and calls Glenn Berger at 3:30 in the morning. And she is screaming at him, telling him the plan is incoherent and that he doesn't have a soul. Like, she like just legit had a major breakdown and temper tantrum. And the next day she was officially fired. So that's how Julie Taymor went out of this musical.
That's how I'd expect.
Yeah.
She went out on a high note, literally. But
so then the next day, I don't know who Chris Ashley is. Do you know, Will, a director? Is he a director on Broadway?
Christopher Ashley. He's the director of Come From Away. He actually also directed Escape to Margaritaville and the Diana musical.
Oh, boy.
Like,
well,
yes,
at least he did Come From
Margaritaville.
Away.
That fine, searching, penetrating, dark work of art.
Yep.
Okay, but Come From Away is like one of the best musicals ever, Rob. It's really good. But
how about Diana? How did that did
not go well because they it opened, or like previews started right before COVID, and then they had to shut down, and then they had a genius idea of like, let's film it during COVID and release it on Netflix so that when it comes back to Broadway, when Broadway reopens, it'll be a massive hit. And that is not what happened.
Well, anyway, so Christopher Ashley,
who will either kill your show or it'll be great.
Yeah. So Michael Cole somehow like had him come to a show, sat him down, and basically, to me it sounds like held him hostage until he was like, yes, I will be the new director of Turn Off the Dark. 12 hours later, Ashley called Cole and was like, no, I'm not doing it. So they were like, oh, new director Christopher Ashley, and then they were like, oh, never mind. And so then they ended up hiring this guy Phil McKinley to be the new director of Turn Off the Dark. And McKinley had never directed anything on Broadway. He only directed things for the Ringling Bros Circus. But at this point, they didn't really have anyone else, and they needed a new director fast. And honestly, this thing was basically a circus anyway, so it was...
Might as well.
Yeah, might as well. Cole then told the cast that the opening night was being pushed back again to June 14th, the same time he told them that Tamor would be taking a leave of absence. And everyone was so upset that the actors planned on walking out and quitting and leaving the show stranded. But all the actors came together, whined together, and then they went on with the show. And that night would be their 100th preview. So another thing that was kind of weird about this new script is that instead of just letting Glenn Berger write it, the investors were all like, oh, but he helped write the other script, so maybe he's not as good as he thinks. So they brought in this new guy named Roberto Aguirre Sacasa to be a script consultant on Turn Off the Dark. But there was a really big miscommunication where Sacasa was under the impression that Glenn Berger had been fired so that he was the sole co-writer of the show. I mean, not co-writer, sole writer of the show. And Glenn Berger was like, you're not a writer, you are my script consultant. And so they did not get along. They didn't start off on the best foot, and they didn't get along very well, but they did end up sort of working together. But because I think Glenn Berger went to Cole and was like, hey, what the heck? And he was like, he's your co-writer, now get over it or you're fired. And so Berger was like, okay, I'm over it.
Yeah.
And I think this is a funny quote too. So Sacasa, I think he wrote some Spider-Man comics, which is actually like, I think that's a good idea to have him on your Spider-Man musical.
Finally.
And yeah, right. And then, but he was also like a playwright as well. And Julie Taymor directed The Tempest while she was making this musical, and so Glenn Berger points this really funny coincidence out towards the end of the book, and he says,
so Julie made a Tempest, making the male Prospero a sympathetic female. I made a Tempest sympathetic to the betrayer. And Roberto? He too wrote a play based on the Tempest. It's called Rough Magic, and Prospero is the villain. And the hero of the play? Melanie Porter, she's a dramaturg, a script doctor, and she has magical powers.
It just seems to fit the situation at hand really well. It's just kind of weird how that worked out.
Yeah.
Berger and Sacasa and McKinley worked together to write a new script, and it seemed like Berger was getting boxed out. Anything that was dark about the show was being removed, and Arachne would barely be in the show at all. Yeah, sure, all the bad things were being removed, but anything that gave the show any substance at all was also being removed. And Berger wasn't happy, but Sacasa and McKinley loved the new script, and it didn't seem like they cared in the slightest what he thought. So Bono and Edge, like Berger, like emailed them and was like, guys, the new script sucks, we need to do something about this. So Bono and Edge, like, they read the script and they were like, yeah, this sucks. And they went to Cole, and because they were like, yeah, we're gonna launch a coup now against this guy. And Cole was like, everybody needs to sit down and shut up, we're dealing with this, and if you don't like it, you're fired.
So this is the script, we're done, no more coups.
No more coups.
Coups closed.
Yeah. And so Berger, after that, kind of did. He just sat down and shut up and was like, all right, I'm here. Friday, March 25th, the cast had their first read-through for 2.0, and at the end, everyone loved it. It was shorter, funnier, and easier to understand. And they thought, finally, they have a hit on their hands. And Cole would get approval from Marvel to shut down the show so it could be revamped. And soon enough, on April 17th, Turn Off the Dark 1.0 would have its final performance. It was never officially recorded, so other than the bootleg versions you can sometimes find online, this piece of theater history will be lost to time, which I'm actually kind of sad about because I wish that I could see it. Because I watched a really crappy bootleg of it where you can't even really see the stage. At 1.0's closing, the actors held up signs at the curtain call saying the show will be back May 12th. So now let me explain to you 2.0's version of Turn Off the Dark and what was changed. We still start out with the tale of Arachne, and it's framed as Peter Parker telling the story for a class presentation, which is sort of the same as 1.0, except you don't have the geek chorus to help explain things. The geek chorus was actually the first thing to get the axe. Like, they cut that thing out of the show as soon as they had control of the script. After that, things stay relatively the same. Peter is mopey because he's a nerd. MJ is sad because she has an abusive father. And then they go on a field trip to Oscorp. Peter gets bitten by the spider. He gets spider powers. Uncle Ben dies after Peter beats up a weird inflatable wrestler, which is something that I really hated when I was watching the bootleg of 2.0, they, like, when Peter goes to the wrestling match, instead of it being an actual actor, it's just this giant, ugly, inflatable wrestler man. And I was like, oh, this has to be something Phil McKinley did. Like, this is disgusting. And then it's not, though. This is something that Julie Taymor put in the show. And I'm like, this is so ugly. This is so stupid. And it's just like an actor jumping on a bouncy wrestler fake man. And it's so weird. Anyway, I just
there's no, like, cool choreography around it?
Nope. Yeah. And J. Jonah Jameson is in the play a lot more. He was in the original, but he barely did anything. And he has a much bigger role. He starts having the Daily Bugle publishing stories about how Spidey is actually a villain and not a hero. He sort of replaces Arachne in terms of being like a secondary villain, although he's not like a villain or whatever. But anyway, then finally at the end of Act 1, Norman Osborn becomes the Green Goblin, killing his wife in the process. And this is definitely a lot better paced. Instead of him becoming the Green Goblin and then dying at the end of Act 1, he becomes the Green Goblin at the end of Act 1. And Act 2, I still think, is a hot mess, though. So it begins with the Green Goblin kidnapping scientists that used to work for him, and he puts them through experiments, turning them into the Sinister Six.
Is that how it is real for real?
No.
All right. I mean, in the comics, it's all imaginary, friends. It's all imaginary.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like that's not as, like, bad. I just think having the Sinister Six in your musical at all that's not just one villain, but, like, on top of the one villain, 6 more. So you have 7 villains in your musical.
That, like, works for a haunted house, but you're right. In a musical, that's just too much to keep track of.
It's crazy.
Too much merchandising.
It's insane. It's way too many, and it mucks up the whole show, I think. And so, like, the Sinister Six run amok, and Spidey stops them all at the expense of his relationship with MJ and Aunt May. And after defeating all 6 villains, Peter decides to quit being Spider-Man so he can rebuild his relationships. But this makes the Green Goblin angry. He takes over every TV in New York, tells Spider-Man that if he doesn't come and fight him, he'll kill all of Spidey's loved ones. Peter decides to be Spider-Man once again, goes and fights the Green Goblin on top of the Chrysler Building while MJ dangles from it. Peter shoots a web at the Green Goblin's piano, attaching him to it, and when the Green Goblin pushes the piano off, he is dragged down to his death with it. And then MJ reveals she guessed that it was Peter under the mask the whole time. They kiss, and then he swings off to stop more crime. So it's better. It's more comprehensible. I
wanted them to have sex at the end.
Well,
I also want to tell listeners that if they really want to see what this was all about, there's a performance from the David Letterman show of Green Goblin performing "Freak Like Me," and it is bonkers. It's so weird. And Bono and Edge hated that song, and I'm going to get into it in just a second, but they hated that song.
That's an Act 2 song, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So it's a new one that they had to write for this new musical that they didn't really like.
And the Letterman show restaged it on their sound studio?
Yeah, he like had them going through the audience and like, you know, all the inflatable people running amok throughout the studio.
I didn't see that, but I'm definitely
I think they messed with Paul Schaefer a bit, but like in a cute way, and I'm just like, this is so camp.
Oh boy.
Well, that's perfect for Paul and Dave, but I don't know about the rest of us. People might have thought in Letterman that it was a joke.
Maybe.
Because he was known for elaborate jokes, you know, on his show.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for everyone in this cast, that working on 2.0 wasn't a cakewalk either. McKinley was super crude and knew nothing about musical theater, let alone like any theater at all. Although a lot of the blocking and costumes and the set stayed the same, McKinley still managed to make some decisions that were very strange. And the weirdest one, I think personally, is that he basically he did fire him, but he ghosted him, Danny Ezralo, the choreographer. But the dancing wasn't a problematic part of the show. And then they ended up hiring this guy named Chase Brock, who was apparently not so great of a reputation. And then Brock started brocking up every dance in the show, which is like, I don't know, his thing. Like
he has
like,
a style. He brocked it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, this guy's doing over there. They're brocking around.
Yeah.
Doing a bit of the brocking.
An example of brocking up the choreography is in the opening song. After the dancers weave a tapestry for Arachne, they kneel on the ground, and now instead of just sitting there, they were doing the eensy weensy spider dance with their hands. That's that. And then also McKinley had a moment where he really wanted to put these girls in A Freak Like Me in a shirt that said Goblins, Goddesses. And apparently this is a Charlie Sheen reference. So apparently this is about the time when Charlie Sheen was apparently like having his total breakdown.
He called the prostitutes my goddesses.
Yes exactly. So somebody was like made a joke and was like, oh, these girls, they're like Goblins, Goddesses. And McKinley was like, that's amazing. And he like ordered the costume department to make him a bunch of shirts that said Goblins, Goddesses on it. But luckily McKinley and Sakasa, no, not McKinley, Berger and Sakasa were on the same page and were like, no, we cannot put this in the show. And they talked him out of it, but he was still like, I still think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
And then
I'm trying to think how we can tell people who Charlie Sheen is if they're young enough to not know what 2.5 Men was. Like, he of course had a career going back to the 80s. His dad is Martin Sheen, who is very good at acting. But I don't know what to do. He was on this sitcom, you guys.
Yeah.
And it was it was the most popular. It was a huge sitcom. It was terrible, like Friends and all sitcoms, most sitcoms. It was just awful. But
2.5 Men.
Yeah, 2.5 Men.
He went totally ballistic.
He was at the top of his game, though, television-wise. Like, the man was making millions of dollars on this show, and then
he started drinking tiger blood or something.
Right? Yeah, he started saying crazy stuff, but he was still like the point of the meltdown. Like, it's one thing when you're Lindsay Lohan and like it's over for you anyway. It's another thing when you're this guy and you're at the top of your game and you melt down and you ruin your career. But it involved prostitutes and tiger blood, yes, and all these.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you knew that, because like I'd never heard anything like that. But I also was I was a kid when this stuff was happening.
I'm a bit older than you. I've got a few years on you.
I mean, I know all about this stuff, but I was also like following it religiously because I liked 2.5 Men at the time, and I was like, what's going to happen to the show?
It disappeared, right? They replaced him, and then it disappeared.
They replaced him with Ashton Kutcher, and then it ended after like, I think it went on for like 4 more seasons.
Really? There were 4 seasons with Ashton Kutcher?
Yep.
Man, I didn't think America could stand him that long. We like him to come back periodically, but then we have a very limited appetite for Ashton.
Yes.
So, well, speaking of A Freak Like Me Needs Company, Bono and Edge were having a horrible time writing that song, and it seems that they hated it and they had no inspiration, but because the Green Goblin had a much bigger part, he definitely needed another song. I like to bring this up because I just think that this line is really sad and kind of funny. So the boys invited Berger down to this empty music studio to hear what they had made. So I don't know why Berger doesn't say why it's empty, but literally it's like all the equipment that the minimum amount of equipment they would need to record this stuff, and then like a couch and a chair. And Bono is just sprawled out on the couch with a microphone in his hand, staring up at the ceiling, ad-libbing lines to try and put into this musical. And the one line that ended up sticking and actually is in the musical.
If you're just looking for a night out on the town, oh, you just found me. I'm a $65 million circus tragedy.
That is like how much money was put into the musical, or like what the budget of the musical was considered, I think.
Ooh, meta.
Yep. So Bono, Edge, and Berger were watching this show that they had a lot of passion for and fall apart around them, and now they felt very powerless. They didn't have any say in what was going on. And although completely misguided, and I guess blind to their own hubris, they thought that they were making a show that they could be proud of. And now all they're stuck with is making a show that they know for a fact will be nothing but mediocre. And I think that they're very depressed about that. But it's also...
But so they care now. It just strikes me that when they started, they're like, yeah, whatever. But all the suffering, now they're highly invested.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, am I right? Like Bono and the Edge in particular, at the beginning, they were like, yeah, we'll write it, whatever. We don't care. Like musicals, whatever. We'll just write some music and we'll make some money. It'll be easy.
I think they did care. I mean, because they were very adamant. I don't know if you remember at the very beginning of the story, they were like, oh, this musical has to be amazing. It has to be amazing. And
because they were going to beat Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Yes,
exactly. I guess to me, it just seems like a lark at the beginning. Like, yeah, it'll be fun. We're Bono and the Edge. We can write this music. It won't be hard. This will be easy. But the suffering and the hardness of it maybe where they weren't, counting on. And then they got really invested in it, not bombing when they realized that they could be involved in something catastrophically bad from an artistic and perhaps liability standpoint.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. It definitely was a bit demoralizing, I would say.
Yeah.
April 18th, Bono and Edge were still determined to take back control of this circus and to make Berger the one and only writer. They emailed Berger and gave him a top secret mission to rewrite the script and not to worry about McKinley or Sakasa so that they can make the show the way they want it. And Berger was like, no, we can't do this, guys. Like, by this point, the cast, producers, investors, and even Marvel had all decided that they loved this new version of the show. It was safe and it was easy. And Berger told the boys that it seems like at this point, all hope was lost for making a show that had any meaning. Well, at least to the boys. It had already failed miserably before that, but they didn't exactly realize that. And then after stomping all over 1.0's grave and pissing off a lot of people to the point that some of them quit, McKinley managed to wrangle this circus in, and previews for 2.0 started exactly when they said they would, May 12th. And so this will be a reoccurring theme where they set a date and they stick to it. So no more postponements.
Yeah.
Yep. Berger actually recalls, too, that May 12th, 2005, 6 years earlier to the day, was the day that Tamor hired him to be a co-writer for Turn Off the Dark. So the show ended up having 183 previews.
Wow.
Yes. It opened on June 14th, 2011. And people liked the show enough. It got some good reviews, some bad reviews, but a lot of the reviews were just kind of like, meh, which is honestly my review of the show too. It's not offensively bad like 1.0, but it's just kind of boring and forgetful. The only things that really got me like excited, I say in quotation marks, watching it was when I was like, why is this happening? Like, this is just such a stupid decision to make. But everything else that and I don't like any of the songs. Really, the only one that I kind of like is If the World Should End, which is a song that Mary Jane sings, but every other song just kind of sucks. I don't like it. Well, Rise Above was okay, actually. After watching it, I did have Rise Above stuck in my head, but even then, it's just like, whatever. It's still like, I haven't thought about it since that night. June 12th, the Tony Awards are happening, and Turn Off the Dark performed one of their numbers for it, If the World Should End, the one that I kind of like. And this apparently made Tamor nostalgic for the show. And this is before opening night, so she decided that she was going to come to opening night. And Michael Cole was furious. He was like, no, she's not coming to opening night. She can't come to opening night. He like completely banned her from coming. Like, he took away tickets from people that he thought might give her tickets and stuff. Like, he was like, she is not getting in here. But she did have someone Michael Cole didn't think about, and there is apparently like one of the music supervisors was a Tamor loyalist and gave her a ticket, and so she shows up and Cole was furious, and so he found out who gave her the ticket and they were fired. But Tamor did make it. Like, it was a little awkward, but she was fine. She was on good behavior. She didn't freak out or anything. And the only person and then Cole didn't want to kick her out because that would, of course, be a giant thing. So, yeah.
I don't think you can fire somebody. I know that he did fire that person, but I think you have a lawsuit on your hands.
Well, I guess I'm just assuming that he fired the person. The wording in the book says... Oh, shit. I don't have the wording. I wrote it down that they were fired. Basically, it was like the wording was that the person who gave the ticket was not associated with Turn Off the Dark after that night.
After that. Well, that sounds like fired. Yeah, I don't think you can do that. I mean, you just gave a ticket to a public performance to an individual and you got fired for it. That doesn't seem appropriate.
Well, at this point,
that's the least of your concerns. I know.
The rules, like, there are no rules for Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark anymore.
That's like old school Hollywood Broadway. I don't think you could do that today.
Probably not.
I mean, you're not supposed to. I know people still do.
So finally, everyone was free of the nightmare that they had while they were working on the show. The only things that the actors and stage crews had to do now was perform, and all the creatives finally got to stop thinking about the show, and it seemed like the weight of the world was lifted off Berger's shoulders. However, he'd get one final jump scare from this show, and not even a week after opening, Berger gets an email from Edge, and it says,
"Glenn, how's it going? Have you had a break from Spidey? When can we start to do more tweaks? I feel there's another 10 to 15% to go."
They just thought they could constantly edit it.
Yes, they did. Yeah, when a show opens, you're not allowed to edit it, right?
Well, I mean, there's a premise there because previews, theoretically, you're paying less to see the show. You're going with the knowledge that it's in previews and it's in process. After you open the show, the contract that you have with your audience is that you have finished the show, that they're not seeing a subpar work.
I got you.
But if you then continue to change it, then yes, your original audience who took a risk, right, to see you on opening night as it is, saw something crappier but paid full price for it. You see what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, I do. I mean, I know that I never really knew why that was a thing, but I did know that, like, you're not supposed to change it. And it totally makes sense. But yeah, Bono and Edge, because they know nothing about musical theater, were like, yeah, well, let's keep changing it. I'm like, no. Yeah. It really was like a jump scare for Glenn Berger too. Like, he was like, I'm home. I don't have to think about Spider-Man ever again. And then the Edge emails him and is like, hey, bud, like, let's work on Spider-Man. But yeah.
I mean, there's in some businesses like teaching and stuff. If you get a new teacher, you get all the enthusiasm of the new teacher, but none of the experience. You know what I mean? So if you don't, you pay the same at the college, right, for my courses, whether I'm new or whether I've been here. But there's a trade-off. On Broadway, there really isn't a trade-off. There's no upside to seeing an unfinished show. You know?
No. Nope.
Unless it's cheaper.
Yep. Yeah, so the show ended up running fine for a few years, incident-free until July 2013, until a dancer by the name of Daniel Curry accidentally ended up getting his leg crushed by the giant moving platform where Chris Tierney, like, fell, and it broke his leg completely, and he wasn't going to be able to dance anymore after that. So after that, more bad press and I think lawsuits and stuff. The show was closed on January 4th, 2014. So Michael Cole talked about moving Turn Off the Dark to another theater in Las Vegas, but for some reason that plan fell through, probably because Cole was finally free and realized how much happier he was without running the show. And he did talk about touring the show through the States. However, that never happened either. And I think that's because it was just so much money to do. So yeah, so Spider-Man is closed and dead and no longer with us.
Rip Spider-Man.
Yes, rip Spider-Man. Well, do you have any closing thoughts here, Will or Rob?
I think that Disney is never going to take a risk on like any superhero musical, because I mean there are stuff that could work, but I know that they're not going to do it. Like, I was like, you could turn, like, one of the non-flying superheroes, like, Doctor Strange and stuff, you could turn into music, like a play or something. Because, like, Harry Potter is in the same theater as Spider-Man was, and it's doing somewhat great. It actually has, like, good effects, and, like, people fly with the audience and no one gets hurt. So it's definitely possible.
That's more basic, like Peter Pan style stuff, though, right? It's not.
Yeah, but there's also craziness. Like there's a underwater scene that they do, and I'm just like, so it's possible to do like really cool stuff, like for tourists on Broadway. That Spider-Man just was ahead of its time.
Is Disney still even getting up to original musicals anymore? Or is it just going back and repurposing old content?
Yeah, they're just repurposing, because I think now they're working on like the Princess Bride and stuff. Now that they own Fox.
Oh.
Yeah.
They're setting it to music?
Mm-hmm.
And then also, but they are kind of making a musical based off of a superhero, except it's only going to be played at Disneyland. In the show Hawkeye, they they do a joke where it's like, instead of it being Hamilton being the big musical, they made a musical called Rogers, which is about Steve Rogers, who is Captain America. And people loved that joke so much in the show that they actually wrote like a mini musical of it, and they're going to be performing it in Disneyland, and you can go see it. So they are kind of doing it, but they're doing it more so as a joke.
Yeah. And the stakes are super low there because you paid your $100 to get into the park and you're getting entertained all day. It's not like you paid your $100 and this better be good.
Yes, yes, exactly.
This is it. This is the 2 hours. This is all I'm getting for my $100.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the pressure there.
I personally believe that it just, like, the show was a failure from the second that they hired Tony Adams, because he wasn't asking to make a Spider-Man musical. Why would you hire somebody? You have people asking to make a Spider-Man musical, and then you look at this guy who isn't asking to make a Spider-Man musical, and you're like, you'll do it. And then every other person that came on board were like, oh, we don't want to make a Spider-Man musical, but they did it anyway. I just don't understand. It's just such a strange
ride.
Yep. Hey, yeah, strange ride. So in true Turn Off the Dark fashion, we had some technical difficulties and we lost the very end of the recording where we were saying our goodbyes and everything. So I'm just going to do that for you guys right now. So, of course, yet again, we had Will Alderson as our special guest. Thank you so much for joining us, Will. You can follow him on Instagram at Tall King Will, so TALLKINGWILL. He's awesome and very funny, and is going to be doing some shows in New York City soon, so check out his Instagram if you live in the city. And then, of course, we have Rob C. Thompson. Voices, we had Andrew Mims, Brianna Literal, Neil Sigmund, and Brandon Walls. And then our sources for today were The Song of Spider-Man, written by Glenn Berger, and it was a fantastic book. I listened to it on Audible, not sponsored, and Glenn Berger narrates it, so it's really interesting hearing it from his point of view. So definitely, if you thought this was interesting, check out that book. It has a lot more details. Super fun, super awesome. Thank you for riding along with us. Please watch your step as you exit, and remember to take all personal belongings with you. Will is awesome. We all went to well, not we all. I went to school with Will. Rob was his teacher, so we love Will.